morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting us along today. It's a pleasure for Angie and I to come along today and join you at your Crime Book Bubble get together. For those of you who don't know me, I know James has just briefly said, but I am, my name's Kim Nash. I am the Digital Publicity Director at Angela's publisher, Bookouture, which is why I'm here today. I live in Staffordshire. And yes, I am the author of rom-coms as well as doing that. And I run a book club as well. And I organise sort of local reader and author events, trying to link people up as well. So I'm a bit of a book geek and I need to get some new hobbies. So if anybody has any suggestions, please go ahead and put them in the comments as well. It's my pleasure, as always, to welcome Angie today to join us. Angela Marsons is the Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author of the Kim Stone crime thriller series. And you might not know, but she's also written a couple of women's fiction novels as well, which we're going to talk about later. Angie lives right in the middle of your area, so she lives right in the middle of Worcestershire. So I know it was a pleasure for Ange to come along today. And she lives there with her partner Julie and her two very cheeky golden retrievers, which I can vouch for because they are very cheeky. And her books have been translated into over 30 languages around the world as well, which is pretty awesome. So I should know that off by heart now, Angie, shouldn't I really, rather than reading it off a sheet?
Well, you should. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now. I mean, you know, this isn't your first rodeo, Kim. So, you know, there's certain things that I thought you might know, but it's always good to have a prompt sheet right by the side of you.
Yes, I always worry that I'll forget something. That's with the excitement going on, that's all. So let's crack on I'm going to ask you first, can you give us a bit of background really about, and I think it all kind of rolls into one probably, but how did you become an author? So I want to try and find a little bit about your author journey. And probably at the same time, you can talk about the inspiration for the crime thriller series that features Kim Stone.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always wanted to write. I loved writing and I loved reading and stories, words, everything from, you know, a very, very young age. At school, you know, you couldn't really follow any career path to that. So I was encouraged to, you know, learn office work. So I did the typing, office practice and, you know, all those sort of things, which I'm really glad I did the typing now. Although, to be fair, Julie does do a lot of the typing for me. So, you know, and she's right here. So I don't want to get smacked. But yeah, so I always loved to write and just make, you know, stories and form pictures with words. I started submitting things probably in my early 20s, and I spent a lot of time writing books that I thought editors and agents would like. I picked characters that I thought were really appealing to everybody. My personal passion was crime, but I didn't think that, you know, I'd be able to write a crime book. So I didn't try because I thought about the plotting, and I'm not a plotter. I'm a complete and utter pantster, as they say. So I kept sending things off and I kept getting rejected, which went on for about 25 years. Eventually, I decided to write the book that was in my head. Again, I was using settings that I wasn't familiar with, but I thought would appeal to agents and publishers. So Silent Scream, the first crime book I wrote, was kind of my rebellion book. It was, okay, I'm going to write about this character that's in my head, even though I don't like her very much. She sounds awful and rude and obnoxious, but I'm going to let her out and I'm going to set her in the area that, you know, I know and I'm comfortable with, the Black Country. And I fully expected to get to about 40,000 words and hit a wall. And that would be it, but at least I would have known that I'd tried. But it was at that point that really the pencil just took over and I just kept going and things were happening organically as I wrote. More ideas were coming, more characters were becoming real. And by the time I suddenly realised I was at 90,000 words and I got an entire book, and I kind of didn't know how I got there really. But I did eventually get an agent, and we ended that relationship after a couple of years. It didn't work out well. I took voluntary redundancy, hoping that, you know, the writing thing was going to, you know, become the dream would happen of being able to write for a living. It didn't work out because of the relationship with the agent, and it brought myself and Julie to the worst point in our lives that we've ever been. We couldn't pay the mortgage. We were selling our possessions to pay bills, everything. We were borrowing money from family members because I couldn't get a job. And it's ironic, I was turned down for a job in an Amazon warehouse. They actually turned me down, which was, you know, pretty low point. But I've just about managed to get a job working night shifts, and I had a call from Keshini Naidu, who I'd worked with at the agency. She'd left the agency and she'd submitted Silent Scream without my knowledge to Bookouture, who were back then a young and dynamic publishers with, I think, 3 employees, Kim being one of them. And it was great, but I couldn't allow myself to get excited about it because I'd had 25 years of people saying, we like it, but we just don't love it. So I didn't think that this would be any different. And then a few days later, the publishing director, Claire, sent me an email saying, you know, I'm absolutely loving Silent Scream. And I was looking on the email for the but, and it wasn't there. It was just a case of, what other ideas have you got? And at that point, because I'd continued writing the Kim Stone books, I had 3 books already written, and I couldn't send that email back to Claire quick enough. I was like, ideas? I'll tell you what ideas I've got. Excuse me. And I think it was literally a week or 2 later, they asked me to sign for 4 books, and that was what I did. And then another 4, and then 8, and then 12. So I'm contracted to write 28 books in the series. So yeah, I'll just keep going.
Absolutely.
That was a long answer to a question, wasn't it? I'll just have a sip of tea.
It's a good job I know you. I'll just have a sip of tea as well in my lovely mug. Look. Sorry to make everybody jealous with my I love Kim Stone. So you've kind of talked there. We've just published book 18 in the series. Amazing, Deadly Fate. First book came out in 2015. Silent Scream, it was October 2015, and you've gone on now to sell over 5.5 million copies, which is just incredible. How does that feel to know that you've sold that many books? And did you ever envisage anything like that happening?
No, I mean, prior to, it doesn't feel real. See, when you say something like that, that absolutely feels as though you're talking about someone else. And I'm ever so happy for this person, whoever you're talking about. Well done. But it doesn't feel like me, because the dream for me as a kid, as a teenager, you know, doing all the jobs that I did and that kind of thing, the dream was to write for a living. And the fact that I am able to do that is an absolute privilege. And I pinch myself every single day. That was always the dream, to be able to write for a living. So to get up every day, and that's my job, something that, you know, I absolutely love to do. That was, you know, that was always the dream, nothing else. So everything else that happened is sort of like, it's cherries on top of the cake, because the cake was being able to call it my job. So everything that's happened, it blows me away, because before Silent Scream was published, Oliver asked me what my hopes were for the book. And I actually remember saying that Julie and I'd be ever so pleased if 500 people bought it, because it was the thought of sharing the stories that I was writing, and people, you know, my biggest fear was that those 500 people wouldn't enjoy it. So that was always, you know, the dream, to share the stories. But now, so it does often feel like that's happening to somebody else. But every day, it's just an absolute privilege to be able to say that, you know, writing is my job, because it doesn't feel like a job at all. If I was working in another job, I'd still be writing before I went to work, when I came back from work, because it's what I love to do. So, you know, I'm very lucky.
Well, I think as well, you know, we talk about your sales, but you've also sold, you know, loads of books in different countries. You've got publishing deals in over 30 different countries. You won, I'm not even going to attempt what the name of the award was, but you won a very high profile award in Italy for one of the books that got translated over there as well. And obviously today we're here talking to a library. You know, libraries are something I know you've used in the past, and you're very fond of the library. So there's obviously, as well as all those copies, there must be millions of people that have read your books and copies around the country as well in libraries. You know, what do libraries mean to you, Angie?
Well, they were, you know, as a child, I was from a low-income family. There was no other access to books. I lived very close to the Redley Hill Library, which was right by my school. And that was my only access to books. So when I got, I'm going to show my age now, but going back when, you know, it was the little tickets that you had. And I had my 6 little tickets. And then I had my sister's 6 little tickets. And I had my brother's 6 little tickets. And I had everybody's tickets. And off I'd go, you know, down to the library with my little tickets. And that was my access to reading, because, you know, my parents couldn't afford to buy books. You know, if you're buying for one, you're buying for 4. So, you know, that was quite an expensive game. But it was my access to reading, and being able to enjoy words. So it was everything.
Absolutely. I remember going to the library as a child and kind of coming out with a big pile of books, and I was like, are you sure I can take these books?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought I was doing something wrong. I mean, I was really with nicking everybody else's library tickets, but you'd walk in and you'd just see all these books, and it was like, in every one of those books is a story, there's information, there's knowledge, the characters. And so to go in with your tickets and bring your old books back and know that you could choose from all these books and, you know, take another batch, it was like, surely there's something wrong with this, surely I'm doing something illegal. But no, it was a great access to books as a kid, definitely.
What's that saying they always say, don't they? If something seems too good to be true, it normally is. But I think in the case of libraries, it actually isn't, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Go to the desk with all these books and expect somebody to say, no, you can't take all those, but I've got the tickets, look, I've got hundreds of tickets, I can take them. I've got a trolley outside.
I'm just walking off with a shopping trolley full of books. So let's talk about Kim. I know you said earlier you kind of, you know, she was a character that was kind of in your head, needed to come out. Talk about her as a character and how she's kind of evolved over the books, where the kind of inspiration went, you know, where did she come from?
As I said, the voice had been there in my head for a long time, but all I heard was like the rude, brusque side of a character. So it wasn't until I actually started writing her, when I started writing Silent Scream and Let Her Out, that I actually learned the other side of her, that yes, this character was brusque and quite rude, but she was also very passionate. She, you know, believed in justice. She had a very good moral compass, in as much as she's always fighting for the underdog. And so that as I wrote Silent Scream, I got to know her better, and I didn't try and alter her and make her more likable than what was in my head, because I thought, this is what it is. This is what's in my head. I'm not going to try and soften her or make her more palatable, because this is the voice. People will either like her. And bear in mind, when I was writing Silent Scream, as far as I was concerned, nobody was ever going to read this book. I was literally writing it just to get it out of my system. So I had that freedom to completely explore whatever this character was. So I didn't try and change her in any way. And then when I got to the end, it was like, well, people will either like her or they won't like her. I can't control that, but I can't change her so that more people like her. She is what she is. And, you know, that was it really. So, and as the books, you know, writing more books, I suppose in a way I started to learn more about her as I wrote more books, and, you know, there are references back to her past, and, you know, I knew that there needed to be a good reason for the way that she was. And that started to come to me as I was writing Silent Scream. As I say, I'm not a planner, so I didn't have all these things written down. It just what happened organically as I started to write about her. So, you know, she does have minor, small character sort of like developments over the books, but she's pretty much what she is. And I absolutely accept if people don't like her, but, you know, luckily for me, a lot of people do like her and do understand that although she can be rude and obnoxious, she's also very passionate and, you know, very much on the side of the victim.
She is somebody I'd certainly want on my side fighting crime for me. Yeah, she's absolutely amazing. And the team, you know, talk to us a bit about the team. Her relationship with Bryant is very, very special, and it's something that, you know, people always talk about and comment on. But then the relationship with the other people in the team as well, with Penn, with Stace, with Tink even, with all the other people. And you've got all these side characters that have kind of come in different, in the different books that you've done. But they all kind of play, some of them quite small parts, but really important parts. I know one that really sticks out with me is Keats and the relationship that she has with him. You know, how have you kind of, over the books that you've done, how did you kind of develop them in the first place? Or kind of how were you inspired to create them and then develop them as well over the years?
I think initially I wanted each of the core team to really be there to demonstrate a side of Kim. So with Bryant, I wanted to make it clear from the outset that there was no sexual tension whatsoever. I didn't want a will they, won't they situation. I wanted the reader to just know, no, they won't. It's not that kind of relationship. It is a friendship. And so I made sure, you know, I made Bryant happily married. I gave them a banter so that, you know, they could have a laugh, but I didn't want any sexual tension there or, you know, questions like that. So Bryant was there to sort of like be the person who could bring out a bit of humour from her, but also the person who could actually now and again say, you know, you've gone too far there. Stacey was to bring out kind of like the protective side of Kim and the nurturing side of Kim, that, you know, although she's not maternal, there's a bond with Stacey that, you know, she wants to empower her, she wants to, you know, give her as much confidence as possible. Dawson was the challenge to Kim. He was always difficult, he was always a problem, he was always defiant, and that was his role, to bring out that part of Kim. So all of these people kind of had a role. With Keats, I wanted somebody that she could sort of like have this sarcastic banter with. So all of the characters really in the early days were to bring out a side of Kim, or, you know, an aspect of her personality. And then, of course, these characters grew into their own right and started to develop bigger personalities, bigger storylines. Again, that's not any planning. It's just what feels natural. It's what feels right for the book, for the story, for their relationships. So they're all works in progress, and yeah, they all bring out, I think, a different side of Kim. But like I say, then they start to take on a life of their own. So yeah, but that's how they were formed, is what they could bring to the Kim pot, if you like.
Absolutely. We have had a few questions which I'm going to try and sort of weave in as we go along. We, as your publisher, are very privileged to be able to publish all of these books. They've been amazing. And I know that we always have a little unwritten rule at Bookouture that nobody's ever allowed to get their hands on the books apart from the editor. And then I'm Julie, the editor, and then I'm one of the very first person to very lucky to be able to read them, and I refuse to let anybody else go anywhere near them until I've read them. But the minute you get straight back in on that very first page, you kind of jump straight back in. You normally, I think you normally have, you know, your first chapter is the incident that's happened, and then you straight back into life in Kim's life. and you feel like you've never been away. And that's the thing that I love about them. Even though there's 6 months between the books, you can literally, you jump straight back in and you know exactly who's doing what, you know, what's going on in their room at work, what's going on in Kim's life, you know, you're kind of there stroking Barney, all these things that are going on. So we've published now 18 books in the series. When we got to 5 years, we did a little surprise for people. So do you want to quickly talk about that as well for those who don't know about the prequel?
Yeah, the prequel was First Blood. We wanted to do a surprise book where we did sort of like no prior marketing at all, and we just kind of like threw it out there on publication day. So we did a prequel called First Blood, and it was an interesting day, I've got to be honest. I mean, people couldn't believe what we did, and it was the story of how the team got together, where they'd all come from, to form this team. And it was an absolutely brilliant book to write, because I got to explore everybody's lives prior, you know, to Silent Scream. Silent Scream was book 1, and it was lovely for a change to go backwards and write First Blood. But what you were saying about, you know, when you pick up a book and it's like being back, you know, with a familiar team, that's because that's how it feels to me. As soon as I pick up a pencil to start the next book, I kind of do it with the thought in my head of what's she been up to while I've been away. And that's how it feels. It kind of like feels like they've been going about their business. And, you know, I've just not been there for a while, and I've just suddenly come back in. So they feel very real to me. So I think that's why they feel very real to the reader. It's exactly the same for me. I'm like, what have they been up to while I've been away? You know, so, you know, that's why it feels that way, I think. I mean, a lot of people say it's like a pair of comfy old slippers, you know, meeting up with the team again. So, which is a lovely compliment. I absolutely love that, because it's like the readers really, really know the characters very, very well. And I love that, because I know them well. And I love that the readers know them just as well as I do.
And are you ever away from Kim, or are you just constantly, you know, when you're doing your washing up, are you constantly thinking about, you know, what's Kim's doing? And, you know, because I know I've written different books, and obviously we've got different characters, and I know sometimes I've kind of put myself in the position of the main character just to see how they work. But do you ever kind of wash up at the kitchen sink and think, I wonder what Kim's doing when she washes up, and, you know, all of that sort of stuff?
So.
Not me, Kim.
Yeah, I think when I'm writing the first draft, so when, you know, the ideas are coming and I've done the research and I'm writing the first draft, when I am away from the desk, I probably am still very much connected to it, and I am still thinking of where that storyline is going and where that storyline, and if I can change that, or if I can merge this, or, you know, if I can do something else over there. So I suppose I'm constantly thinking, you know, during the first draft process, of where I want to go, regardless of what I'm doing. And if something happens to give me an idea, I'll just run back to the desk and scribble it down. Or, you know, if I'm out and I've got my phone, I'll do a note on my phone. I don't so much put myself in Kim's position, because, like, she scares me. But I do find myself, you know, thinking about the plots and, you know, the storylines, even when I'm not writing it, certainly through that first draft part. So, yeah, I'm probably never away from the books during that period.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about characters who scare people, but now you've brought it up. You have, yeah, there's one particular character in your book that's quite a scary person.
I think you might be talking about Alex, and I think you might have messaged me many, many times to say how much you dislike that character.
Polite way of putting it,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, she's absolutely awful, but my goodness, she's fun to write, because very early on I wanted to give Kim excuse me, a nemesis that was equally as intelligent, but really I wanted to explore a true sociopath, where, you know, we often see sociopaths, psychopaths portrayed as having an Achilles heel or a weakness. And the more I read about psychopaths, the more I learned that there is no Achilles heel. You're not going to be a psychopath and still love your dog. You're not going to love anything at all. You're not going to have an emotional connection to a tin of beans. You're just not capable of that emotional connection. And so I wanted to explore that and actually represent, you know, a true sociopath as being charming. You know, they can be appealing, but they are incredibly dangerous people, or can be. And so, you know, I wanted to set Kim up with this, I suppose, enemy, but also I wanted this mutual fascination, because as cold as Kim is, she still can't understand someone who has no empathy at all. And so that was how Alex was born. And I know you don't like her, but she's fun to write.
I only don't like her because she scares the living daylights out of me. That's why. Whenever she pops up in a book, I'm like, oh my God. That's why, Angie. You know that.
But even I never know what she's going to get up to next time as Kim. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Let's talk a little bit about the locations that you've written about. You've set Kim's station as Halesowing Station, which is kind of in the heart of the Black Country, and there's a lot of locations in and around the area, and there'll be people here today that live in those areas. What made you pick those locations? Are some of them fictional? Are most of them non-fictional? You know, what sort of research do you do? So yeah, can we just talk a bit about the locations, really?
Yeah, because I decided to pick the Black Country because it's where, you know, it's where I've always lived. It's where I was brought up. It's the area that, you know, I know like the back of my hand. I know what the people are like. I know what the atmosphere is like. And because of the dark industrial past of the Black Country, it suits Kim's character very well. Kim, I always say this, Kim wouldn't be suited to the Cotswolds. You know, that's a lovely, gentle area, beautiful area. But her, you know, she's like a product of the Black Country. So I think, you know, she's a mirror of that. But I wanted to write about the area that I know. The Black Country may not be sexy like London, Manchester, or, you know, Edinburgh, any other big cities, but it was an area that I know well, and it suited Kim's character. So again, I thought Silent Scream wasn't going to be read by anybody, so it gave me the freedom to do what I wanted, really, thinking there was no editor sat on my shoulder. It was just me and what I wanted to do. And I'm glad I did, because, like I say, the area suits her. I do use a mixture of fictional and actual places. I've had some lovely messages, some great messages. After book 4, I had lots of people message me and say, is there really a body farm in the Black Country? And I was like, no, that's fictional. It's based on one in America. It's not in the Black Country, I promise you. And there was another one, there was some waste ground next to Pale Plain Cemetery in Silent Scream. And it was a couple of years afterwards, I had people actually contact me and say, there's some fencing up around that wasteland. Have they found more bodies? And I was like, there weren't actually any bodies there, really. That was, you know, a factual place, but the bodies were fictional, which is now houses. But if I plan on doing something bad at the location, then I don't tend to name it. I'll give it a different name, or I'll make it a fictional place so that there's no negative associations for actual places or businesses, because, you know, things can be perceived as though it has happened or it has the potential to happen. So if I'm going to do bad things, I tend to try and keep it a fictional place.
Fantastic. And can we talk a little bit about your writing process? So you get an idea for a story, and where does it go from there?
The ideas for the stories tend to come from an idea that I'm interested in or that intrigues me, that I want to learn more about. Book 12, I'm surprised I made it to book 12 to write about cults, because I've got a lot of interest in that kind of thing. So, and that's just an example of a subject that interests me, that I hope that readers will, you know, be interested in as well. The most recent one, Deadly Fate, I wanted to explore the world of psychics, but I also wanted to explore the tricks that psychics can use to gain confidence from people, and also explore how harmful they actually can be to people who need comfort, need guidance. And that again, so I kind of have an idea for something I'm really interested in, and then I build a crime story around it. It's like, right, how can I turn psychics and, you know, what I want to explore into a crime story? And that's kind of at the basis for most of the books. And that's where it comes from. It can be, I hear a line. I once heard just somebody say something about Lima syndrome, and I'd never heard of Lima syndrome. I knew full well what Stockholm syndrome was, but I didn't know that Lima syndrome was, you know, the complete opposite of the captor actually developing feelings for the captive. And that sent me on a you know, down a rabbit hole on Wikipedia. If I go on Wikipedia, oh my goodness, I'm gone for the day, because I literally go from article to article to article. I'm all over the place. And that, just hearing about that Lima syndrome completely set up the idea for stolen ones. So sometimes I can just hear a line, or, you know, somebody says something, or I see something on the television, and that can spark, you know, an idea for a crime book, or something that I just want to research further, and then form into a crime book. So it always comes from a subject that I find interesting and want to explore further.
And then your physical writing process, what's your sort of process for that? Do you write on you know, do you type straight onto a computer? Do you write
I'll
stuff?
show you my tool.
I was going to say, I know you're a notebook fan.
This is my tool, and these, that's those are the tools. Every first draft is handwritten, and it's using these. They're my favourite pencils. I've got hundreds of them. Julie always buys me loads and loads for Christmas to make sure I've got enough. She doesn't want me ever to run out of the tools, you know. And yeah, every first draft is handwritten. I can't do it straight onto the computer, because as a teenager, I loved the process of actually writing. I love that feeling of your hand going across the page and the scratch of the pencil on paper. And, you know, I still love that now. I still love that feeling of writing what's in my head. And so there's a connection, a definite connection there for me with that I don't have with the computer. If I try and type straight onto the computer, it just stays blank, and I just stare at it and go, well, that's a nice white screen. I have no idea what to do with it. Give me my pencil back and watch me go. And so that it may make the process a bit longer, but it is what it is. I just have to write it first. So, and then Julie types it for me. And then, so by the time I finished actually writing the first draft, Julie's started typing it, and so I can start going through it to do the second draft from that point on. So my part of the process is quite long, but Julie makes the next part of the process very short, because I don't type it. She, bless her, she does that for me, but she's reading it as she goes, and
she's also kind of
conversations.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's kind of also your first editor, isn't she? And you're, you know, somebody to bounce ideas off. And I know that you have lots of meetings and stuff. We do,
because, I mean, Julie knows the characters just as well as I do after all this time. And we do have meetings, you know, through every book is a different journey, and in every book I'll get stuck somewhere. I'll get to a point, it's like, oh my goodness, this isn't working. and I can spend 2-3 days torturing myself over what to do, what not to do, where have I gone wrong, how did this happen, what, how do I change it? And then I'll finally go to Julie and say, we need a meeting, and I'll tell her the problem. And often within 10 minutes, she's given me a different way of thinking, or, a sound bite or something. And I'm running back to the desk and I know what to do. So I'm starting to learn not to torture myself for days on end, and to just literally grab Julie, make a cup of tea and say, I need to talk to you about this. So she's a huge, huge part of the process. We do bounce ideas off each other all the time. She, when you get this close to the characters, sometimes you can have them do or say things and not realise you've actually gone, off script a little bit. And Julie will say, Stacey wouldn't actually do that though. And I'll look at it and think, no, she wouldn't. So because Julie knows the characters just as well as I do, she knows when to pull me back and say that, like Kim, she'd be a little bit more forceful there. So it's really, really helpful, because I know that, Julie's like a safety net in some ways. It's, if I've put aliens in chapter 37, she'll tell me I've got to take them out again, kind of thing.
Brilliant. I know that Julie's obviously a huge part of the process, and I know she's probably by the side of you. So hi, Jules.
She's gone outside. She's left me. She's got to do some gardening. Look, you know what she's like. She says she runs on solar energy. If the sun's out, Julie's out.
Fantastic. Do you set yourself a word count each day?
No. Because we don't have kids, we've got dogs, and luckily they're quite flexible. So if I like to write first thing in the morning and last thing at night. It's when I feel sort of like there's an intimacy to not much going on. Your emails aren't going, your social media is not going, so it feels like the world's a bit quieter. But I call it the bite. If my brain is just throwing, sort of like, as not to be, too horrible, but if it's just vomiting stuff, I will just keep writing until I can't write anymore, because as writers, we live for that burn. We live for the fact that our fingers or, our hand can't keep up with the ideas that are coming, or the words or the dialogue or the storyline. We live for that because that's our excitement. It's like, oh, this is going to happen. Oh, I never saw that coming. So I suppose it's when the brain is at its most, fertile. If I can carry on, I'll just keep going, whatever time of day or night, while there's the bite, I'll just keep going. So no, I have a target. I like to have a rough idea of what I'd like to achieve each week, but I don't have a daily count, because it's just like when the burn comes, just ride that wave and go with it, and just write until your hand cramps.
You obviously were a big reader when you were a young girl, and I know it's something that you still love to do today. Which authors have inspired you over the years as kind of a child, and then as you grew into sort of adulthood and became a fan of crime fiction?
I mean, as a kid, huge Enid Blyton fan, obviously. I mean, I would just devour every book I could get my hands on there. Later on, sort of like when I was 12, my English teacher asked if she could bring in some books that were above my reading age. But she was the first person to actually say, I think you've got a bit of a gift with words. And she bought me some Andrea Newman books. And that was what actually inspired me to say that I want to write books, because they're heavy on human emotion. I realised that I wanted to be, as much as I loved to read the books, that I wanted to be a person writing these stories and trying to create this emotion, and to make these pictures with words. So I loved those books. Then I absolutely loved Sidney Sheldon. early 20s, and you know, I've read his books three times. Val McDermid, absolutely love her books, and Carol O'Connell, she's written a brilliant series called about Mallory, and so there are just so many. Linda LaPlante, but I especially like Val McDermid and Carol O'Connell because they had the courage to create characters that were just a little bit off. I love the Tony Hill series, and I think as a character he's absolutely brilliant. And with Carol O'Connell, the character of Kathy Mallory, he's sort of like borderline sociopath, even though she's a police officer. And I love that they had that courage to, you know, do characters that just were a little bit, you know, a little bit off, that you had the potential to not really like very much. So they were massive inspiration for me, and to let Kim Stone out of the box.
And what about these days, Angie? What do you like to read? I know you're still a huge reader, and I know you don't get as much time as you would like to. And I know that publishers now are throwing books at you left, right, and centre, saying, "Can you please read this and sort of give us a quote?" But which authors now are you loving reading?
I mean, I love a lot of my fellow Bookouture authors. You know, Lisa Regan, I absolutely love her Josie Quinn series. I use her as a reward to be able, you know, if I've made my word count, I can read a Lisa book. Also, K.L. Slater, Kim Slater, I love her psychological thrillers. Callie Taylor, Helen Fields, there are just so many. Caroline Mitchell, obviously we started our journey at the same time, and we still read each other's books, you know, as soon as they're out now. So yeah, lots and lots.
And if I was to grant you a dinner party and you can invite 5 authors, apart from me, obviously, who else would you be? I'll just go and do the waiting on, or like.
Well, I've named a couple of them. Definitely Carol O'Connell, because I would love to ask her more about the Mallory character. Lisa Regan, yes, I'd bring her over from America. She'd have some explaining to do. I think I'd actually, out of left field, Susie Lyons, I'd like to come as well, because she's another Bookouture author. And, you know, some of her storylines as well have just sent my mind. Sydney Sheldon, definitely, because what a mind. And probably Agatha Christie. I mean, who wouldn't want to invite Agatha Christie for dinner? So
absolutely,
there's a mixture of dead and alive. But I think that would be a good dinner party. I think we'd have some fun.
I think it'd be a fantastic dinner party. And Susie's actually also a fabulous cook, so maybe we could get Susie into cooking as well. I can vouch for her cooking for sure. What's the best writing advice you think you've ever been given, Angie? And what sort of, if you've got people in the audience here today who would love to write a book, or are in the early stages of writing a book, what kind of advice would you give to them?
First piece of advice I would give is don't show or share your first draft with anyone until you've finished it. It's a massive, when you're starting out, one comment, if can completely change the way you feel about the book, the characters, your journey. I always call the first draft my sandpit, and it's where I can do whatever I want. There's nobody sitting on my shoulder. As we talked about aliens earlier, if I want to bring aliens into chapter 28, I can. On the second draft, I know I'm going to have to take them out again. But the intimacy of that first draft is just you and the story. And if it's easy to think, I just wrote a great chapter there, I would love somebody to read it and tell me what they think. One comment can colour how you view the entire rest of the journey. So my advice there is to always keep that your little secret not in a bad way, but like keep it between you and your idea and let it go. People can have it and talk about it, you know, and give you advice, comments afterwards. You've written the story. What was in your head is now on the page, but it can be so very easily coloured by innocent comments. Somebody saying, oh, I wasn't keen on that character. Well, it's like, you don't know what I was going to do with that character, but now I'm not keen on that character because you said that, you know. So definitely that's my, you know, I will keep it to myself, but also never give up, because you just never know what might happen. If the dream is to be published, then keep going and keep going and keep going. You know, I would often feel sorry for the postman bringing me so many rejections. I'm sure he knew what I was doing. And this is, you know, when the agent sent the rejections back and they landed on your doormat and they thudded, you know, with disappointment. But keep trying, because you never know. And also, if you're going to submit for publishing, don't ever forget why you started writing in the first place. We all start writing because we love the process. We want to tell a story. We want to share characters. We want to get something that's in our head out. And rejection, it can beat that joy out of you over a period of time. But then push aside publishing, get your notepad, get your pencil, get your computer, go to a different room and fall in love again. Make sure you always keep that connection with words and what drew you to wanting to write a story in the first place, because it can be hard if you go on the publishing road. So it's more important to be a writer than a published writer, because being a writer is part of who you are as a person, and it's important not to lose that.
I'm just going back to a couple of questions that I haven't covered yet. Somebody has said, is it sad for you when, without giving any spoilers away, is it sad for you when you end a character, or a character might leave the team, or, you know, when you decide not to write about a character anymore?
Yes, definitely. You know, that has happened, and I've written scenes where I am absolutely crying my eyes out, which is amazing because it was my choice, if you know what I mean. But I've written scenes where the tears, and I'm trying to write through the tears, and but I've got, you know, and I'm crying proper tears. But there can come a point where a character has developed more than you expected and more than the rest of the team, and they no longer have anything to actually bring to the team. They may be in danger of becoming too much like another team member, and so that can become stale, and that can happen. And when it does, as hard as it is, you have to let that character go. So, you know, the people who know what I'm saying.
Shame the girl knows what you're saying.
I know there's a lot of people that haven't forgiven me yet, but I think they understood. I think people understood when I did it.
Yeah, no spoilers, folks, but trust us, we all, you know, as her publisher, we were all like, oh my God, what have you done? It was, yeah, quite amazing. And one of the other questions that's just popped up as well is, are you ever stumped for ideas?
No, I have actually got down there, I've got my Kim book, and anytime I have an idea for something or a subject that, you know, I'd like to explore, I'll pop a note in the Kim book, and sometimes that can come out as a second storyline. In Deadly Fate, I wanted to, it's in my book that I wanted to explore the subject of extreme gambling. People who, you know, would bet on a raindrop falling first, you know, or what colour car was going to come round the corner. That extreme gambling where it is an absolute compulsion, you know, to gamble. And I didn't know how I was going to do that, but it was a subject I wanted to explore, and kind of like the psychology behind it. So that came in as a second story in Deadly Fate. So they're all there in my book. It's just where I'm going to use them. So whenever I hear a line or something or a subject, I just scribble it down in the Kim book, and it might come out as a main storyline or a second storyline, and it may fit with another plot or, character development that's going on. So, yeah, I make a note of anything that interests me.
Okay. Thank you for that, because we're on book 18. You've got another 10 to go at the moment. I say at the moment because who knows what the future will hold. We might persuade you to write another 12 or something soon.
I've said it before. First of all, I've told Bookouture that they will have to throw me out or get security to remove me from the premises, because I'm not going anywhere. And I've always said that I will keep writing the books as long as people want to keep reading them, because I can always think of new adventures, new challenges, even new areas. There's no saying Kim won't get seconded, to other areas, that kind of thing. There's always some situation to put her in and challenge her, which is ultimately what I like to do. So while people are enjoying them, I will keep writing them. And for anybody who's interested, and if the question was ever to be asked, no, I'm not killing Barney. And if I get criticised in 10 years' time that Barney is the oldest fictional dog in literature and he couldn't possibly be that old, I'll take it. But I want readers to know I'm not killing him.
Amazing. I think that's probably one of the questions we get more than anything, isn't it? Angie, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you today. I know today was something that was really important for you to do because you are a huge supporter of libraries. And, it's something that's amazing to be involved in. And I know that there's a lot of sort of controversy around libraries and whether they'll stay, whether they'll go, whether they get funded and whether they don't. So I know it's been a real pleasure for us to do this event today. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand you back over to James and Anita now.